Let's have a lengthy discussion about the real-time control editor window. The first place I want to start out is with the labeling. I'm going to go over the labeling in the layers and scenes and also with the sliders and switches. So to start out, we have a drop-down menu right here that lets us select which control layer or really which module we're working on. So right now I have the master module selected. I can just choose one from the list, or I could use these little arrows here. The arrows might seem slightly counterintuitive because you're clicking up and it's making it run down this list, but nonetheless the numbers are still incrementing every time you hit up and then decrementing every time you hit down. When you select a module from this list, it's different from selecting a module that you're editing in the performance editor. So right now I've selected module 3, whereas here I've selected module 1. When you select modules, the control layer, you are changing the real-time controls. And then you're also changing which scene you're selecting for which module. So with module 1 selected, I can use this row of buttons to change these scenes. And this is all very similar to the way the Kronos is set up. I can change the names of any module, just like in the performance editor, but I cannot change the name of the master layer. That's always going to be called master. So over here, I have this little button. I can click that and then choose like arpeggio or whatever. And then if I go over here, you can now see that module 1 is labeled as arpeggio. In fact, it says the number 1 arpeggio. That's just to designate that this is module 1. If you choose any name for a module aside from the default name, like for module 1, it would just be the default name is module 1. But if I choose the name like accordion, then it'll always say 1 accordion. So it just labels that this is module 1 and then it has the name. You could also choose a name like module 5 for module 1, but then it will say 1 module 5. Again, giving it that numbered designation showing which module is renamed. For the scenes, it works very much the same way. I have a drop-down menu that lets me choose up to 32 scenes. Side note, in the Kronos, it's only 8, but you get 32 here, which is pretty nice. Use this little button, and again, you can choose little names for that scene. The scene names are per module. So right now I chose to name scene 1 bridge. You see, again, you have a little number here to designate that it's scene 1. But if I jump over to the master layer, its scene 1 is just simply titled scene 1. So I can choose a different name for this if I felt like it. So the names are per module. I'm going to go back to the default names for these. So just scene 1. And I can just double click instead of clicking the check box. Go to the very top, double click. So we have this scene matrix here. And that is a way for us to easily decide how we want to launch scenes, or you could think of these as, clips, like in Ableton Live. I believe you set up clips in that, what's it called, the session view. And then you can like launch those clips in different ways. I don't use Live, so I'm not 100% sure how that works. But basically, by default, every time you change a scene, let me go down to the master layer. Every time you change a scene, all the scenes in the module layers are mirrored. But you don't have to have it that way. I can have the modules set up in any way that I want, and then that's how they'll launch when that master layer scene goes into effect. So 1, 2, 3, but then when I get to 4, boom. It's nice because you can also click and drag to easily reorder scenes. The drum track parameter up here is only in effect if the drum track is actually on. Once this is on and running, you can actually disable it for that particular scene. This is related to the master layer only, so it doesn't disable if you say put the scene 1 from module 1 on like scene 5. I would have to go with the master layer and go to scene 5, and then that would stop the drum track from playing. The light does not change, but that is better because you need to know if the drum track is armed or not. The next thing is linking scenes. So as I showed before, you can change the order of modules for that to be launched during that master layer scene. But you can also decouple one of the modules from following whatever the master layer has set up for its scene launches. So by clicking this, I've decoupled module 1 from the master layer, and now when I switch the master layer, you can see module 1 does not change. Of course, when I click that again, module 1 does change. So the master layer takes a bit of explaining. I have a parameter setup from module 1 over here in the RT parameters. This is something I'll get into great detail on much later, but I can go over here and select module 1, and then module 1 has module layer and master layer. Module layer lets you assign various real-time controls to the knobs and sliders, or I should say GE parameters to the knobs and sliders in the module layer. So actually, right here, this is to like switch 3. So switch 3 is invert phase, and you can see that it's note series input transpose. There's usually actually a few things assigned to invert phase. And you can see right here that a little pop-up occurs with a string of numbers. I'll explain what those are in a second. But anyway, with the master layer, it's the same thing. I can take GE parameters and assign them to from a single module and assign them to the master layer. So right now, I've actually taken the swing and I've assigned that to slider 1. And it's actually set up the same exact way that I have it in the module layer. I don't have to have it set up the same way in the module layer, but again, I don't want to talk too much about setting this up. I just want to show you what a parameter does in the master layer. So we have rhythm and swing from module 1 set up in the master layer. And in fact, if I slide it, you see that little pop-up? That means the first number, 1, means module 1. The second number means real-time parameter 1 from the real-time parameter group in the performance editor. And then the last number is the actual GE value. So these knobs and these sliders are always some value between 0 and 127, but how they correspond to the GE parameter is dependent on how you set it up in the real-time parameter window. Again, this is complicated, but we'll study this later. But anyway, when I change rhythm and swing from module 1, let me go down to the rhythm group, and you can see that my swing is on 50%. And if I look at this, you can see that that value is 50%. It corresponds to the GE value. So if I slide this down, you can see that it changes the actual value to 15 for the swing of module 1, which is running this GE. If I jump down to the module layer, you can see that the same parameter is assigned to slider 1. So what happens if I change it here? Well, it changes the swing value absolutely. So it does not interact with the module layer. It just depends on whichever slider that assigns a value last. Does that make sense? Like both the master layer and the module layer have direct control, but the one that sets the parameter is whichever one you last toggled. The next thing that I want to go over is, let's see, how about just setting up scenes in general? So you can launch scenes in any order that you want. And with Karma, you can kind of toy around with the RTC model like we've been doing in this series and create little scenes. And it's super simple to set that up. I just move the slider, and you can see once I move it from its original position, it changes to yellow. Its original position is just whatever you had saved however you had saved the state of the controls, of real-time controls. So if I actually move this, and right now it's yellow, if I just hit store, it changes to blue. If I move it from there, it just means that I'm changing it from its save state. So anyway, for scene one, let's say I want to mess with this rhythm, with this swing parameter. It's just as simple as like putting the slider there, and then it just stays there. It just automatically saves in the scene. I can do the same thing with the other scenes. I can make each scene have a different swing value. So that way, when I click through my scenes, it's changing that scene value. I can do that for each parameter, of course. And let's see. I can then later on use the master layer to like sequence out which scenes that I want to play. And let me show you how that works really fast. So in Cubase, I have just a MIDI note. Remember, Cubase controls our tempo. And then I have CC number 30, which chooses the karma scene. Choosing scene 1, which is a value of 0, it just starts counting the scenes at 0. So scene 1 is 0, scene 2 is 1, scene 3 would be a value of 2, so on and so forth. So let me jump over to Karma, and I'll choose my master layer. And right now I have this set up, so scene 1 runs module 1, scene 2 runs module 2. I'm not going to get into how to set this up right now, but just know that that's what's going to be happening with the sound. So when I hit play, it'll switch to scene 2 here. Well, at least in theory, it should have, but I'm not on the right MIDI channel. There we go. Now when it loops, it'll work. I'm gonna go here. Let's see. So we've run into a slight bug. Let me see what the problem is. Aha, I had changed my channels. I was experimenting with some stuff earlier. There we go. So you can see this flipping from scene 1 to scene 2, back to scene 1, and in theory it should go to scene 2. And I'm kind of happy it didn't, because we can run into this glitch here, where occasionally where it loops, it won't actually switch the scene. I could put these little CC events to the beginning of the phrase of each bar, and then it would definitely change scenes that way. But the reason I don't like doing that is because when switching scenes, you can hear like a little click. So you hear that little click. It just doesn't switch like fast enough. So that's why I like having it on 30-second notes. And then I like setting the nodes before where I want them to change, and then it will smoothly go into the next scene. But when it loops, it does run into that problem. If I wasn't looping, I wouldn't run into that problem. But unfortunately, we are looping. So now I have to explain what this scene quantize does. With this, it basically makes the engine wait before it actually switches scenes. So I could have it wait like a full bar, and hopefully it'll then switch scenes after a bar. And so here's an event. So a little bit later. And then of course messing up when it loops. So that's why I like having it just as fast as it goes. 30-second notes seem to work a little bit better than 30-second note triplets. It's too bad it never actually did not do that glitch. Sometimes if you just stop it and restart it, it'll work, but maybe some other time I can do a more advanced tutorial on actually sequencing out scenes. Oh, there's something that I do have to explain. So let's actually start playing this again. The scene switching is done per whichever layer you have selected. So right now I have the master layer selected, so it is switching between the master layer scenes. Oh, and it's working now. So yeah, sometimes when you stop it and restart it, it does work. Anyway, if I were to choose module 1, it'll actually start switching scenes of just module 1. Of course, module 1 doesn't have the the controls to switch the which module is running, like the master layer does. But yeah. So let me switch back to the master layer. Very cool. So you can do that for a whole song, and then of course it's launching scenes for all the modules, and you can have your like scenes renamed. You can give your scenes names that like help you remember what they do, and how you set them up when you're messing with the RTC controls. And there's just a lot of complexity that takes place here in the scene matrix. The next thing to go over is the compare button. So the compare button is per layer. So right now, I think if I hit the compare button, it won't make any changes because it doesn't look like I have anything in a yellow state or a non-saved state. So yep, it won't do anything. But if I were to change all these parameters to off of what they were saved at, make them all yellow, this compare button will switch them all to blue. I can leave that like that, actually, and then I could go to the master layer, and then I could switch some parameters here, and then I could hit compare, and then restore, and it actually doesn't change what I had done for module 1. You can see I still have the restore button enabled here, but not for the master layer. The other button below that is a reset button that just resets all sliders to 64 and all buttons to off. I can hit compare. Go down to the module layer. I'll leave it where it's at. If I were to change a parameter while it's in the restore state, it actually undoes with the restore. It undoes the restore state, and now I have like a new value that a new position that I can restore from. The pads, you have 16 pads in Karma, which is nice, in the Karma software, unlike the 8 pads that you get in the Kronos. I can edit with its own editor window. The editor does allow you to assign. You can see that button is mirrored here. You could just play some MIDI notes and then hit assign and then click a pad, just like on the Kronos. But unfortunately, with the way I have things set up, this is only getting MIDI from Cubase and not from the Kronos. So I actually can't just hit a chord on the Kronos and assign a pad. That's okay, because I could still do that for the decoupled Karma modules that are in the Kronos itself. You can choose which channel that the pads are responding to, or sorry, that the pads are outputting to. You can have it output to the to the drum track if you want, and then you can you have this little transpose and modify section. This is really great. You can offset the value of pads. So I could choose like -35, and then I just click the set values, and it takes 117 minus 35, which is apparently 82. Or I can do absolute values. So I could switch them all to like 100 if I want, and I just hit set values. I don't have to set the values for all of the pads. I could do it for an individual pad or groups of pads. Finally, we have octave transpose, which is going to be self-explanatory, and semitone transpose. This is really neat because right now it says the name of the chord that these MIDI notes designate. If I click the semitone button, it actually changes the name of the chord without changing the notes. It's just previewing what you would be transposing this chord to. It's not until I hit set value that it actually makes these notes the same as this chord label. So that's everything. I think I did a pretty good job on this one of explaining all the features in the real-time controls window editor. Next time I'll start doing videos on these various groups in the performance editor, and then after that, which is going to be a long time, we'll finally get into the GE groups, which is the real meat and potatoes of Karma. So thank you for watching this, and I hope this helped. Take care.